Hello, my name is Lauren Burwell, and today I'm going to be talking about a professional issue that is causing a rapid rise in turnaround rates for teachers, and that is teacher burnout. So, what is teacher burnout? Psychology Today defines burnout as a state of chronic stress that leads to physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and detachment, and feelings of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. Teachers are commonly high achievers who like to work hard and are always looking for ways to improve. While these traits are admirable, they can mean that educators fall prey to perfectionism and don't leave enough time for rest and recuperation. So, what is teacher burnout? In the article we read by Hanauer, Better Schools Won't Fix America, we learned that they believe educationism is the root cause of most of America's problems, including teacher burnout. He claims that educationalism is a belief system grounded in familiar story about cause and effect. As America In the article we read by Hanauer, Better Schools Won't Fix America, we learned that they believe educationism is the root cause of most of America's problems, including teacher burnout. He claims that educationalism is a belief system grounded in familiar story about cause and effect. As America's public school system floundered, so did the earning power of America's middle class. And as inequality increased, so did political polarization, cynicism, and anger, threatening to undermine American democracy itself. Hanauer states if American students are lagging in the literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving skills, our modern economy deserves most of the blame, not the teachers or their unions. Unfortunately, this is considered an extremely hot take. Most individuals believe that if their children are struggling in school, it is always the teacher's fault and that there is no other underlying issue that can take the blame. Hanauer discusses how if we want our children to succeed, we need to do much more than extend a ladder of opportunity. We must also narrow the distance between the ladder's rungs, meaning we need to provide high quality public education, sure, as well as high quality housing, healthcare, childcare, and most importantly, pay our teachers at the very least a dignified middle class wage. In the Washington Post article, teachers are told not to get political in the classroom. What does that actually mean? We learn about a new Arizona bill claiming any controversial issue is not germane to the topic of the course or academic subject being taught. Jennifer Rich, the author of this article, asked the big question, where does teaching about politics end and partisan political teaching begin? She states that the new bill will thwart any hope we had for a strong democracy in the future, as these teachings are how one is created. Teachers affected by the new bill are becoming even more disheartened about their careers as they are now forbidden to teach their students any kind of lessons regarding tolerance or critical thinking skills, such as weighing fact-based evidence, considering multiple perspectives, forming and articulating opinions, and responding to people who disagree, which then leaves teachers feeling, what is the point in being an educator if you're not even allowed to teach anything truly meaningful? Although there's been many attempts to reform the education system, Saggart points out in their article, A Quality Education for Every Child, that parents and teachers have not seen clear positive impacts from these system-wide reform efforts, and, in many cases, have only seen the negative impacts of overtesting, narrowing of curriculum, frustrated teachers, and state disinvestment in education that stretched far beyond the recession. Sager continues on to explain how, without teachers, the reform is nearly impossible, and how, even though they are at the core of the education system, teachers have become an afterthought. Teachers are underpaid and undervalued. Currently, too many teachers must learn on the job, sometimes without much support. Not by chance, the student who gets the least experienced and least qualified teachers are more often non-white or from families with low incomes, worsening already existing inequalities in these students' access to a quality education. Saggart explains that the recent teacher strike, burnout, and turnover rates are all related to severe underpayment of teachers. Teachers are about 30% more likely than non-teachers to work a second job, and in many states, teachers earn so little that they qualify for public benefits. Many teachers have to spend their own money on classroom supplies because public dollar falls short. 94% of teachers pay out of pocket for classroom supplies, with the average public school teacher spending $479. Additionally, teachers now face higher expectations than ever before. They are expected to differentiate and adjust instruction for English language learners, special education students, and students who are behind or above grade level. The nation has underinvested in anti-poverty programs and put its faith in education as the great equalizer, which means that teachers are being asked to bear a significant portion of the responsibility to meet students' basic needs, respond to trauma, and provide social and emotional learning. Educators in Ohio are required to abide by a code of ethics. While these rules and regulations are not a lot to ask of teachers, it is important to point out that many of the flaws in the education system directly defy the code of ethics. Principle number 1, responsibility to the profession. The professional educator is aware that trust in the profession depends upon a level of professional conduct and responsibility that may be higher than required by law. This entails holding one and other educators to the same ethical standards. Principle number 2, responsibility for professional competence. The professional educator is committed to the highest levels of professional and ethical practice, including demonstration of the knowledge, skills, and dispositions required for professional competence. Principle number 3, responsibility to students. The professional educator has a primary obligation to treat students with dignity and respect. The professional educator promotes the health, safety, and well-being of students by establishing and maintaining appropriate verbal, physical, and emotional, as well as social boundaries. Principle number 4, responsibility to the school community. The professional educator promotes positive relationships and effective interactions with members of the school community while maintaining professional boundaries. Principle number 5, responsible and ethical use of technology. The professional educator considers the impact of consuming, creating, distributing, and communicating information through all technologies. The ethical educator is vigilant to ensure appropriate boundaries of time, place, and role are maintained when using electronic communication. The article from The Atlantic, "It's Time for a Real Code of Ethics in Teaching," perfectly encapsulates exactly how the teaching code of ethics is being broken by the system from which it came, with a real-world example following an Atlanta school cheating scandal. The author, Noah Berlatsky, points out that unethical behavior occurs in virtually all professions, and that it occurs particularly when there are clear incentives to succeed. He pulls an excerpt from an article written by Jonathan Chait where he states, "Incentivizing any field increases the impotence to cheat," comparing the profession of journalism with teaching. He writes that giving teachers and administrators an incentive for their students to do well will cause a reason for more of them to cheat. Berlatsky, however, argues that if the field of work were to be compared, it is important to recognize that if they were on a level playing field, journalists would be compensated for their cheating, as are teachers. He reveals, "Ethics for teachers is not apparently first and foremost about educating their students or broadening their minds. Rather, ethics for teachers in our current system consists in the following rules. The implicit linguistic signal being given is that teachers are not like journalists or doctors, committed to a profession and to the moral code needed to achieve their professional goals. We have reached a point where we can only talk about the ethics of teaching profession in terms of cheating or not cheating, as if teachers' main ethical duty is to make sure that Scantron bubbles get filled in correctly." Berlatsky discusses how in most professions where social respect and social capital are found, The professionals collaborate in the creation of their own standards, and that it is assumed that since these standards are ingrained in the goals of the profession, the professionals are best equipped to inaugurate and monitor them. However, teachers are one of the only professions where the rules of conduct are imposed from the outside. From a teacher's perspective, it's as if they're being treated as children. Berlatsky creates a comparison between teachers and oncologists, suggesting that the retributions for teachers whose students perform poorly on state tests would parallel to tethering oncologist salaries to patient outcomes. This belief system, as Berlatsky describes it, serves the moral experience of teaching from the moral evaluation of teaching, which makes it almost impossible for good teachers to stay in the system, justifying the teacher turnover rates as well as teacher burnout. He resolves that if we want better schools, we don't just need more ethical teachers, we need better ethics for teachers, ethics that treat them as adults and professionals, not like children playing games. Another way in which the system is defying their own code of ethics was brought to light in the USA Today article, Missouri Teacher Resigns After School District Tells Him to Remove Pride Flag, Not Discuss Sexuality. In this article, we discovered that a Missouri teacher recently resigned after parents complained about a pride flag in his classroom, and the district told him to take it down. He describes the encounter stating, "At the beginning of the school year, I had two signs above my whiteboards that read, 'In this classroom, everyone is welcome,' and an LGBTQ plus pride flag on my bookshelf. This was an attempt to make my classroom more open and welcoming for all of my students, and nothing was ever taught about the flag because it stood there as a reflection of my classroom as a safe space for my LGBTQIA plus students. This act is abiding by the Code of Ethics, Principle Number 3, Responsibility to Students. In Section B, Article Number 2, it clearly states the professional educator demonstrates an ethic of care through respecting the dignity, worth, and uniqueness of each individual student, including but not limited to actual and perceived gender, gender expression, gender identity, civil status, family status, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and culture. After questions arise regarding the removal of the flag, the teacher informed his students with the truth, adding that if they had any issues with his sexual orientation, there were other open classes available. After this, he was accused of pushing his agenda by angry parents. He then received a letter from the district superintendent claiming, "Our classrooms cannot become a personal platform for pushing one's personal agenda. If you are unable to present the curriculum in a manner that keeps your personal agenda on sexuality out of your narrative in the classroom discussions, we will ultimately terminate your employment. There will be no references to sexual or gender displayed in your classroom. Your instruction and classroom conversations will stay clear of discussions regarding human sexuality and/or sexual preference, and any research or assignments given should not require a topic related to the above." The affected teacher, Mr. Wallace, stated that the obvious issue with this letter and that it appears that there is a different set of rules if you are an LGBTQ plus educator. He said, "The district has no mention of gender identity or sexual orientation in their non-discrimination policy, and that is disconcerting enough. Couple that with a policy banning anything that expresses part of me in the classroom, and it makes for a hostile work environment." He added, "There is never a problem when a heterosexual teacher displays pictures of themselves and their spouse in a classroom, but I have a flag and all hell breaks loose. What we have here is an inherently prejudiced system that preaches tolerance yet refuses to act in accordance with its own moral code of ethics. Would you want to work in a system like that?" Teacher burnout has been becoming a more significant issue since the pandemic in 2020. The Brookings article, How the Pandemic Has Changed Teachers' Commitment to Remaining in the Classroom, demonstrates the statistical evidence behind the issue. They write, "Teachers had to adapt to unexpected conditions, teaching in unprecedented ways using synchronous and asynchronous instruction, while also being challenged to establish connections with students, families, and colleagues. Health concerns added to the mix as some teachers went back to in-person education during the height of the pandemic. As a result, teachers' levels of stress and burnout have been high throughout these unusual pandemic times, raising concerns about a potential increase in teacher turnover and a future teacher shortage. They discovered a survey finding that since the pandemic, approximately 1/4 of teachers indicated a desire to leave the field, compared with an average turnover rate of 16% pre-pandemic. In a study they conducted from March 2021, they analyzed data from 1,045 teachers, about 30% of which teachers teaching fully remote for the majority of the school year, 49% taught in a hybrid model, and 21% reported teaching fully in person. And a large majority of teachers, at least once during the school year, reported they had to switch instruction. They also surveyed teachers' reported probability of leaving their current state or the profession within the next 5 years. 69% of teachers reported they expected to work as a teacher until retirement. 9% reported they did not expect to, and 30% said they did not know. 42% of teachers declared they have considered leaving or retiring from their current position during the last year. Of these, slightly more than half say it was because of COVID-19. Their results highlight an important potential problem. Schools could potentially lose their more experienced teachers. The author stated that higher levels of job dissatisfaction and intentions to leave could affect teacher effectiveness and in turn harm students' academic progress. It is important, therefore, to get a better understanding of the factors that explain the increase in teachers' considerations to leave so that we might find better ways to support teachers. The article suggests addressing health concerns while trying to minimize school disruptions and changes in teaching modes, increasing school vaccination rates, working to control community spread, adopting school mitigation methods, and facilitating a supportive work environment to help teachers. In the article, The Teachers Are Winning, What Does It Mean for the Profession by Stefan Shawchuk, we see how teacher strikes are becoming increasingly effective. Shawchuk writes, teachers are the largest profession in the United States, and collectively they have the power to demand and win changes to funding and salaries, emphasizing how the activism ignited by teacher strikes could lead to the reform the system has needed for years to reduce teacher burnout and turnover rates. The activism could find a more permanent channel for its energy, perhaps through the regeneration of teachers' unions. The teaching strikes have been closely linked to diminishing pay as well as budget cuts. State education budgets are increasingly being allocated to the rising costs of healthcare and pensions, putting downward pressure on the salaries. Shawchuk suggests that strikes will strengthen the relationship between teachers and unions, claiming for the grassroots teachers who want to be in their classroom teaching, they can't sustain this kind of energy around the fights that need to be had without at some point the unions being involved. All of this to say that activism and union bonds can be an essential catalyst in policy reform that will reduce the cause of teacher burnout. In doing some research of my own, I found an article from Applied Education Systems in which it lists several ways to prevent teacher burnout. Number 1, stay healthy. By exercising, sleeping, and eating well, you will be physically and mentally prepared for the barrage of challenges throughout your school year, but staying healthy is just the beginning. Number 2, indulge in personal time. Your personal time is just as important as your professional time. Hobbies are proven to make people happier, especially when you can actually enjoy them. Regardless of what engages your mind during your free time, it should make you happy to indulge in those hobbies. Your free time matters. If you spend it working, you're not actually away from work. Instead, you wind up working 12 to 18 hours every day with a brief break to sleep. Teachers quickly burn out with that kind of schedule. But instead of overworking, you can find ways to enjoy your time away from work. Number 3, talk to your colleagues. Communicating with your peers is one of the best ways you can prevent burnout because they can offer you the best support. Number 4, recognize what you do well. Pride in what you do well can quickly make you happier when you see all of the great qualities you exhibit in the classroom. Even if your best skills take place on off hours like grading or planning, you can still see the positive results of your work every day. The key is to look for it. Once you open yourself up to the positive results you produce, you can pride yourself on your abilities as an educator. Number 5, prepare ahead of schedule. If you're going to teach successfully, you have to have a solid plan going into each of your classes. Following a pre-made plan is much easier than playing a semester by ear. Number 6, leave schoolwork at school. When you want to keep yourself from burning out, the best idea is to create boundaries for yourself. Keep work at work, keep home at home. Segment the parts of your life that you think should be separate. This requires you to say no sometimes to both personal and professional opportunities, but these boundaries will make you happier as a person. And number 7, make yourself a priority. Ultimately, to be a successful teacher and avoid burnout, you have to take care of yourself. When you're happy and healthy, you're a better teacher who can truly be there for your students.